ESPN's analytics got it wrong. Ohio State should not be ranked above Penn State right now.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State football. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko, and I'm your host of the #1 Penn State sports podcast out there. I'm also a credentialed media member for both Penn State football and Penn State wrestling. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. We got a very special guest on the show today to talk about all of these pressing topics with the $40 million rosters, allegedly, why it's bad for college football, but finally somebody makes a good decision. The college football playoff format is changing. Probably not going to last that long with the expansion, but at least for the time being, it takes a step in the right direction. Still, the analytics, ESPN's anyway, say that Penn State is not better than Ohio State. We beg to differ here as I bring on my special guest now, Jason Lord. He's also a credentialed media member for Penn State football. He's been covering high school football, state college area high school for more than 15 years, and he was my co-worker at ESPN Radio State College when we were there together before the station got disbanded. So, Jason, your initial reaction here when you see that the analytics for ESPN say, because it's going to differ, and I'm going to talk about why, but Ohio State is still the #1 team. Alabama is actually number 2, and then Penn State is number 3. I don't agree with that, but I guess what? As the saying goes, numbers don't lie.
Well, numbers don't lie, and I think the past doesn't lie. I think a lot of times when you look at preseason rankings, they're great because it hypes the sport. They're not so great because I think it just takes off of what you didn't see just yet. And what you didn't see is a lot of what lies ahead. So analytics tells some of the story. I'm not going to say it doesn't say anything, but I don't think it tells the entire story. I think what Penn State has coming back in terms of roster retention is probably, to me, the best in the country, with the fact that everybody really came back that you thought was going to, and you maybe thought wasn't going to. You knew you were going to lose Abdul Carter. You knew you obviously were going to lose Tyler Warren to graduation. So analytics, I feel like, can be great for the sport. They can be bad for the sport. They're telling the story that Ohio State is still better right now because they're #1. At the end of last year, they were #1. Obviously, they come into this year. They have Penn State in Columbus, which is a huge advantage. So you're always going to have them near the top. You're always going to have Alabama near the top. It's almost like when people vote and they see a name they recognize, they just vote for the name they recognize sometimes, and not knowing much. And I feel like that's kind of a case of what analytics do. Sometimes they recognize a name and not necessarily everything. And
well, that's just it. Let me interject into that, because when I look at the analytical rankings and the offense and the defense, they actually break it down by offense, defense, special teams. I can see where Penn State special teams might be a little bit of a question mark, but that doesn't factor in for me wholeheartedly. Does it contribute? Yes. Does it factor in entirely? No. But here's where it gets intriguing, is that Ohio State's defense is actually ranked 2nd. Penn State's defense is ranked 6th. This is where analytics might be an issue, because they're not factoring in Penn State poaching Jim Knowles away from Ohio State.
Poaching Jim Knowles away, Ohio State losing so much that they lost on defense. They have a lot coming back, too.
Well, that's why. Why are they still 2nd? They have Caleb Downs.
No, I think when you go back to last year when Ohio State spent the money they spent on NIL, but not only that, you also had roster retention coming back. You got Sawyer back. You got JTT back. You got a lot of guys back at Book on offense that really wanted to win a national championship and made that team so much better. Especially, I thought, defensively is where they were still really good. They lose a lot of guys, and when you lose that veteran leadership, it sometimes isn't only a talent loss. It affects a lot of other things, and I think that's where Ohio State could be affected a little bit this year. You flip to the offensive side, I think what they're looking at...
Offense isn't going to be an issue.
No, offense isn't going to be an issue at all. Obviously, you have 2 great wide receivers, incredible receivers.
3,
and Jeremiah Smith is just unbelievable. Innocent tight end is is going to be real good too. So I think when you look at in running game, again, they're going to split the running game same way they've done it. But I still feel like a lot of what maybe analytics is looking at is knowing that Ohio State brought a new quarterback in last year from the portal. You bring in Will Howard, he wins a national championship. Mm-hmm. Can Sayin do the same thing? I don't know. Because when you lose the quarterback position, you lose the quarterback or you lose a coach. I think it changes your team in a big way sometimes. And it may not change it at all. But there's not much of an in-between a lot of times. So it's hard to say really where Ohio State's going to be. I think they're going to be a great football team. They always are. And the story's going to start to be told week 1 when they have Texas and Columbus. I think that's going to be a top 5 matchup without a doubt. But where Ohio State stands, I think a lot of the analytics probably build off of what they did last year and what they have coming back, which isn't as much as what a team like Penn State has coming back. So I don't know. I don't think it's going to tell the whole story, but I think part of it is basically we recognize the name from last year. Ohio State has a completely rich tradition. They're in the top 5 every year, so why not this year? And they very well might be. They very well could repeat by the end of the year. But in terms of where I'm sitting right now, I think what Penn State has coming back, I would probably put them ahead of Ohio State.
That's what I'm saying. Because when you actually compare and contrast, interestingly enough, the analytics agree that Penn State's offense is actually slightly better than Ohio State's. Now, that's not just wide receiver, because Ohio State does have Jeremiah Smith.
Ohio State's got a huge advantage at wide receiver.
And Carnell Tate and Brandon Innes. So Julian Sayin's job is going to be extremely easy. But here are the true differences. Drew Allar's not a first-year starting quarterback. He is a fourth-year veteran.
Julian Sayin to grow, even as a 4th-year veteran. Yeah,
and I imagine that he'll improve. I don't think he's going to be the same quarterback that he's been the past couple of seasons. He's going to improve substantially, but it's what he has around him. Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. Ohio State doesn't have that.
2 best running backs in the country in terms of a tandem. I would agree. Yeah.
Ohio State is trying to create that, but they don't have.
They don't have it anymore.
Co-starting 4-year veterans.
I think they have the potential to have very good running backs, very good running backs. But I think that right now, as you look at it in terms of a veteran, yes. I think last year Penn State and Ohio State was probably neck and neck. Maybe Ohio State even had the advantage just a little bit at running back last year. It's not the case this year. As Singleton and Allen, you may have the all-time leading rusher in Penn State history by the end of the year with Nicholas Singleton. He needs 1,020 yards, I think, to jump Evan Royster and become number 1. So I think there's a chance he may do it. So, I'm giving Penn State the advantage there. Wide receiver, I'm not taking anything away just yet from what Penn State was able to do in the portal. I thought they absolutely addressed it spectacularly. It was incredible. And are they better now than they were in the Orange Bowl where they didn't have a catch? Certainly.
Much better.
But I think Ohio State right now, where it stands, is better at wideout.
Oh, yeah, easily. Yeah. The difference, though, is going to be in the trenches. It's the offensive line. Yeah. Ohio State is going to have a completely different front 5, and that's what happens when you send off players to the NFL. But Penn State was able to retain 80% of its starting offensive line. They're going to see somebody like a Cooper Cousins emerge. You have not only 2 deep, but honestly, Jason, I could argue that Penn State's 3 deep at spots on the offensive line this season, and that is a luxury that you need when you are intending to play a 17-game schedule.
Yeah, the only team that I may put, you could maybe put Notre Dame a little bit on par with Penn State, maybe Alabama in terms of offensive line too, but I'm putting Penn State's offensive line up there with just about anybody's. Nolan Rucci obviously also is going to have that second year too, which I think is going to be a huge part of it, but I think Nick Dawkins coming back was massive for this team, not only because of what he's able to do at the position, but also what he's able to do in terms of leadership. I still think when you lose that in the locker room, it's tough to replace that, because that maturity is one thing and that leadership, again, is another thing. And that's why, obviously we're going to get to NIL coming up later on, but I think roster retention is as important as NIL anymore. And you look at the last two national champions, Michigan, if it counts, was the team that brought guys back to win a national championship. They did it. Ohio State, same thing.
Yep.
Went into the portal quite a bit. Spent a lot on NIL last year, yes, but retention I thought was as important for them. Same goes for Penn State this year. Can they be that third team to do it? I think retention is as important as NIL when it comes to a team being that championship contender.
Well, we're going to get into the playoff format now, as the College Football Playoff Committee actually does something right here.
Yeah,
they make it that the seeding is based on the final ranking. So Penn State actually would have had a bye despite losing the conference championship. So we're going to break that all down, how it affects Penn State, other teams in the Big Ten. That is coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. Now, that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, spending, all in one place. So you stop just managing your money, you start building wealth. You'll get surprising insights. When I actually started using Monarch for myself, I realized just how much I was spending on different things like dining out or groceries, package deliveries. Now I get to budget smarter and save more. You also get the all-in-one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals. You'll also get easy collaboration. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, stay on the same page without all the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's right, 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Finally, somebody does something right in the sport of college football. We'll see what the House settlement has for us, and that's why we're going to talk about $40 million rosters. But the playoff format is changed to reflect the rankings. So whatever top 12, whatever the final top 12 are, that is going to be your seed. So the one, you don't get a bye anymore. If you win your conference, you're not the top 4 seed, which was the right thing to do. Jason, I just went on a I'm going to go on a rant later about it because I'm going to talk about it on some upcoming podcasts. But Boise State should have never been a 4 seed.
Nope.
And Penn State losing the Big Ten Conference Championship actually helped them and hurt Oregon in the process because they had to. Now, right. Ohio State was not an 8 seed, but that's the point here, is that Boise State was the domino where they leapfrogged everybody else. And Arizona State, the same thing, when they shouldn't have. Look, Jason, it is not rocket science to say that any of those teams that were in the college football playoff, if they were in Boise State's position outside of Oregon, but going into the Mountain West Conference, Penn State would have annihilated the Mountain West Conference easily, and they would have won a conference title. So the margin of victory and everything else, they would have gotten that third, they would have had that bye, that 3rd or 4th seed if you drop any one of those teams. So it's not even just Penn State relevant. It's anybody that would have been in that exact same situation. And Boise State should not benefit from playing weaker competition and jump into the top 4. Same thing with Arizona State, because we are seeing the Big Ten and the SEC create this power 2. Then there's the ACC and the Big 12, and then everybody else. Your group of 5, your group of 6 is now how they're dubbed. So this was a no-brainer. Penn State still would have had the bye as that hypothetical 4 seed there, which is interesting because they lost that conference championship game. But it gives a little more value, not a lot, but a little more value to the conference championship games. And it's just the right thing to do at the end of the day. Yeah,
it's completely the right thing to do. The NFL needs to take notes and do the same thing, have teams with better records playing maybe the later games, not necessarily a 7-9 team hosting a 13-3 team. So I think college football did the right thing. Will the NFL follow suit at some point? Who knows? But yeah, sticking with college football, absolutely. I think Penn State or Ohio State, anybody that played in that, a lot of teams that played in that first round, with the exception of less than a handful, I think very easily were better than Boise State. They were better than Arizona State. There's no doubt about it. And now you're going to be rewarded for that. You're going to have the higher seed. And I think it's the right move without question. Does it affect now whether or not if you get a home playoff game? Maybe. But I think the biggest thing is you potentially could get the bye now when you couldn't get it. So I think it's the right move. I think it's a great move for college football. And it's not, like you said, it's not just Penn State. I think Ohio State would have annihilated those teams. I think even Texas would have probably annihilated those teams. Even
in the Mountain West Conference, everybody would have gone. Everybody would have gone undefeated. That was in the college football playoff. I can stand on that easily.
Yeah, go as far as the teams that lost: Clemson, Tennessee. I think they probably have a chance.
Undefeated.
A good chance to beat Boise State. Good chance to beat Arizona State. And Arizona State nearly knocked off Texas. I get that. They still didn't belong in that spot. I don't think they belonged there really. Having that bye, and Boise State just really couldn't match up well. Penn State played great in that game, don't get me wrong, but I just didn't think Penn State or Boise State matched up well with Penn State. And now you're going to at least try to avoid a lot of this with having rankings determine the seeding as opposed to conference championships. And
well, here's the other side of the debate with it. Here's the other side, and that's probably what I should have let off with.
No question, I know where you're going with it here.
Notre Dame not being in a conference,
yep,
could get a bye.
That's
so
okay.
there's no incentive for Notre Dame to join a conference. Look, if I'm Notre Dame, I'm never joining a conference. They got the best setup. They get to rake in all of the money. They don't got to share it with anybody. And then now you get rewarded for being a top 4 team and avoiding a conference title. If you're the Fighting Irish, you got it made in this sport, and you're all alone. Nobody else.
Absolutely got it made. Yeah, you got it made for sure. That being said, they were a lower seed last year and played in the national championship. So I think with Notre Dame, the one thing they've got to continue to do, and I'm not sure they will at this point, because there's, as you said, there's not much of an incentive, obviously, not to play in a conference, not doing that. They're not sharing that revenue. But the other part of it is, do they still have the incentive to beef up their schedule, which I think is what they have tried to do, I think, in a lot of ways, to impress the voters a little bit more when it came to the college football playoff. So we'll see. Obviously, they have that first game against Texas A&M, which will be an eye-opener, but there's,
can you strong-arm them into a conference? I personally, I'm against the notion of the NCAA or the college football playoff or somebody tells Notre Dame what to do because they are their own university. However, you are subscribed to this college football league. So therefore you got to abide by some sort of rules here if you want the same benefits. I don't blame Notre Dame for doing it, but they have it made.
How many other teams have their own network of home games? Not a one.
You don't subscribe to the UConn football network?
Nah, well, it's not NBC, I can tell you that. But no, I think Notre Dame, obviously, sure, they haven't made. There's no question about it, but they're still going to have to earn that spot. Yes, they're not being in a conference. I think there's a chance for a path to potentially be easier. Yes, I would agree entirely with that for Notre Dame. But on the flip side, they're still going to in years past, they went to the college football playoff. They ran into Alabama. They ran into a very good Clemson team. That's going to happen at some point in the college football playoff, no matter where your seeding is. So, I think
they should be penalized for not being in a conference.
And I think
in this playoff
they very well could be. I think they could be.
They have to.
Yeah, I think they. It's a subject that I think can be overblown, but I also think it's a subject that has to be paid attention to. Yes, so I think there will be coaches and fans, no doubt about it, complaining about Notre Dame not playing in a conference and having that chance to get.
Let the chips fall where they may. Penalize them for avoiding playing an additional game against an elite caliber team. If they want to be out of a conference, then then they get penalized.
Yeah, there's a chance you're going to do that. Obviously, the major networks, when it comes time to picking a game, who's the first team they're going to pick above anybody? It's going to be Notre Dame. You have the chance to get a Notre Dame home game on your network, and it's not NBC. You better believe you're going to take it. They did last year. ABC, obviously, putting them on Friday night against Indiana. But, I think there's a good chance not having that extra game is going to hurt them in a lot of ways, because you then see the conference champion that extra week. You have the potential to put them above. And we've seen this before in college football. We've seen a 2-loss LSU team jump a lot of 1-loss teams and win a national championship. So absolutely, there's no doubt there's going to be voters paying attention to that, where Notre Dame's not in a conference. Not only that, they're not playing that last week when everybody else is playing. So basically, you don't have that extra chance to lose, I think, is the easiest way to put it.
You get a bye week.
Yeah, you have the bye week, and you have extra rest.
You avoid
and
competition.
When it comes to the playoffs now, that is a big factor. It wasn't as much of a factor when it came to a bowl game or even the college football playoff when there were 4 teams, because everybody had a little bit of a rest. Now you get that extra rest. Sure, I think that plays a big role without question. So I do think there will be voters that penalize them. Flip side, I don't know if there's much you can do about it. I think in terms of they were a small problem with a bigger picture problem. Bigger picture problem being the conference champions all getting that bye, that some of them didn't belong to have it. Because to me, and look, I'm not running down the other conferences. This is very much going to sound like I am. I think college football right now, as we're looking at it, and even as you're looking at the Power 5, you have the Big Ten and the SEC here. Yep. You have the other conferences really below them. I think that just the power of college football right now is the Big Ten and the SEC. And to me, I think you have to have those 2 conferences having 2 of the top 4, no matter how you see them.
Well, conferences aside, and speaking of Notre Dame, allegedly, this is one of the $40 million rosters that are out there. They got to squash this now. So this is bad for the sport, and we're going to explain why coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Well, Jason, perfect for this conversation. To finish up, we talk about $40 million rosters, allegedly, and 2 schools out of the 6 that are projected to have this kind of budget, allegedly. Again, this was all started by Curt Cignetti, Indiana head coach. He doesn't put this out there if there isn't legitimacy to it. And what it is it's the combination of the NIL fundraising plus the rev share that is going to come from the House settlement here. So here are the 6 teams that Cignetti named outright: Ohio State, Notre Dame, Oregon, go figure, Texas, Miami of Florida, not Miami of Ohio, and the surprise one, Texas Tech. Now that has to do, I mean, Texas Tech has become this massive spender here since one of their NIL boosters sold shares in his company and then devoted it to Texas Tech football. Look, Jason, there are so many problems with this because there's no competitive balance in a sport that already doesn't have competitive, like limited to no competitive balance as it is. The reason it stops at 40 million is because Ohio State, Oregon, Notre Dame, et cetera, can't fundraise up to what? Why stop at 40? Why not 50? Why not 60? Oh, well, all of the other schools and institutions, that's their problem. They should do that. Or, oh, Major League Baseball has that. That's the thing, though. The teams in Major League Baseball choose not to spend the money that they have with the rev share agreement. If you don't have the money, you can't spend the money. So why is it fair that, because Oregon has this, booster and Phil Knight and all the connections, why do they get to have a $40 million roster? And it's not even about Penn State at that point. You will never see any group of 6 schools emerge, or even the smaller schools. I think of Tulane a lot. I bring them up quite a bit. Maybe I shouldn't use Tulane as an example constantly. I guess they're my second favorite team at this point with how much I refer to them. But you can do so much. So for Penn State, for example, the rumored numbers for their NIL fundraising was around $10 to $12 million. Then you add that $16 million from the rev share. Okay, that's 28. You can do a lot in building your college football roster with $12 more million. How is that fair in any way, shape, or form?
It's not overly fair, but on the flip side of it, you're technically playing by the rules right now because there really weren't any rules. I think that's where
what rules?
You had a step. To me, when NIL began, somebody had to come to the forefront and figure out stability, and there wasn't. There wasn't stability for years, and now this is what it's become. There's no doubt about it. And when a team loses a national championship like Notre Dame, when you're that close, Texas, when you're that close, you go out, you spend money to try and get over the hump, and you do your best to retain your main roster. Mm-hmm. Penn State, same thing. Ohio State wants to stay at the top. And obviously, without a doubt, and Ohio State still, despite being national champion, they've lost to Michigan. They want to beat Michigan. That's a big part in Columbus right now. It's without a doubt. You love the national championship. You also love the bragging rights of winning the game. So is it fair? No. But are there any rules being broken right now? Not really. So because there aren't any rules, and there
need to be rules in place.
And I think there will be. I think this is where how settlements come in place. This is where I think James Franklin's made this point. I think others have made this point. It's where college football needs a commissioner. Nick Saban, I think, is perfect for that spot. And that is where you start to regulate what exactly can be done, and then rules are put in place. But as of right now, their $40 million rosters are not good. No, they're not. But unfortunately, they're playing by the rules because there aren't any rules as we look at it. And really, as NIL is right now, you either, as a coach or a team or a school, you adapt or you just get out of it. And that's what you saw a lot of times. And Alabama's still a top 5 team, but Nick Saban got out of it. You flip to basketball, Jay Wright at Villanova, Mike Krzyzewski at Duke. These guys, obviously, just you don't want to deal sometimes with the headache that is NIL. And these guys got out of coaching in a big part probably because of this. And Nick Saban especially, as it was one that spoke against it. There's no doubt about it. So I think this is probably the last spring you're going to have where you're not going to have house regulations or some form of settlement, some form of regulation in some capacity. Whoever takes the leadership role, which who knows what that's going to be. The NCAA is doing their best to avoid it. I can tell you that. So we'll see what happens. But once that happens, you're not going to have this. So I think teams know that. And that's why you're seeing, for lack of a better term, I think the wild, wild west, or people spending money as much as they have this spring because they know things are going to change very soon because you're finally getting a little bit of a grip on what NIL is. Because the first couple of years, you had no grip. You had no stability. You had essentially anarchy in a lot of ways.
And that's where the breaking point is, because now it's, do you follow you got to move away from this college athletics model, based on the direction that everything's going in. And I know there's going to be a lot of ramifications from it, Jason, but you got to follow the NFL model. Have a salary. College football needs to be, this is the best, I think, scenario, because we don't know the true ramifications of it, because college is so delicate in the fact that football and men's basketball support every single non-revenue generating sport. Everybody else takes a loss. They are playing in the red, and it's football that pays everybody else's bills in conjunction with men's basketball. But we know that football is king. So there's such a gray area, but if you follow the NFL model, okay, then college football becomes separate. These players become employees of the university. So you're getting into such a complete different territory that made college athletics so unique as it is. But this was Pandora's box. There's no going back. And sure. I don't see a right solution to all of this. At the end of the day, somebody suffers. Somebody's going to suffer.
And somebody suffers no matter what in the world of sports. I think, Zach. That's really what you see when a business takes place, and that's now what college football has completely become. There's no doubt about it. I do agree with you a little bit. I think you probably need some of that NFL model, whether that's having some sort of guarantee in money, some sort of guarantee in a contract where you can't renegotiate a contract and try to leave a school mid-season or in spring when you want more money. So I think there has to be at least some kind of, again, I've used this word so many times, and it's just, it's not here yet. I'm hoping it's here at some point. That stability. You absolutely have to have that when it comes to NIL, or you're going to have what you're having right now, where you just don't really have a lot of answers, and you really don't have a lot of discipline for your spending. in a lot of ways.
That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. And I feel like we're only scratching the surface with some of these topics. He is Jason Lord, credentialed media member for Penn State football. He and I were co-workers back at ESPN Radio State College when that was a thing. Jason, thank you so much for the time. Thank you, everybody, for checking out this show. If you are new to the show, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcast. Let us know your thoughts down in the comment section. Again, Jason, really appreciate the time, the insight, and a nice conversation about all things Penn State football related.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me anytime.